the third point that I don't think is ever mentioned in any account I've ever read about these plans to just bomb Iran and rid them of their nuclear program is the fact that Iran is now part of a global coalition of big countries that oppose us.
Now, see, this is very interesting, Tucker, is why are they part of that coalition? And it's because of our own stupidity. We force these countries together that don't naturally have aligned interests. Okay, Iran is a Shiite theocracy. Russia is an authoritarian country run by Vladimir Putin and a group of oligarchs, essentially. China is a quasi-communist, quasi-state capitalist state. North Korea is one of the last true communist authoritarian countries on the face of the earth. A lot of these countries should have natural tension. And there's been points in the post-Cold War era where a country like Russia was willing to do things like not sell weapons to Iran because they didn't want to inflict instability on the Middle East. Russia also traditionally, despite the fact they've supported some of Israel's adversaries, did have a good relationship with Israel. So Israelis, along with the United States, were able to convince the Russians at key points like, hey, don't sell these weapons to Iran or don't do this. And so while they were growing closer, there were still gaps between them. And let's also be honest, too, is Russia has had significant problems with Islamic radicalism in their country. And they don't want to support a regime that in the past has supported Islamic radicals, both Sunni and Shia, across the Middle East and across other parts of the world. They don't want them doing that in certain parts of the world. And so why are they pushed together? Well, it's because we adopted this mindset, and even before the Biden administration adopted this, is that this autocracy versus democracy. And again, it wasn't well defined before that, but we started just bucketing these countries together. Here's a great example: axis of evil. When they said we have this axis of evil of Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. We just talked about it. Iran and Iraq hated each other. They were natural enemies. And by the way, North Korea...
And what does North Korea have to do with it?
Here's an interesting thing. Iraq and North Korea broke off relationships in the Iran-Iraq war because they were so close to the Iranians. And the North Koreans, it appears, may have ripped off the Iraqis in the 90s. They got them. This is, again, it hasn't been confirmed, but they may have ripped them off when the North Koreans offered to sell them weapons. And the North Koreans are actually kind of famous for this. They got the money and said, yeah, we can't give that to you. They actually tried at one point in the early 90s. Again, I can't say if this story is for sure, but I read this on a military blog. They tried to pay for some Russian military equipment with used car parts. So I bring this up in that, and again, Russia and China, these are two countries with historical antagonisms. They've have a shared border that they've during the Soviet times, they fought wars over. They have the Chinese look at Siberia and its resources, and it's growing its population. I don't think it's growing right now because they killed 100 million baby girls. But this is an area with resources that they need, and that there's been in the past conflicts over. There should be tension between those two countries, but our foreign policy of bucketing them all together, sanctioning them, treating them as one united front has kind of willed it into existence.
Has made them one united front.
Yes, and it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to pull them apart because they have interests that don't align. We should be able to be working more with the Russians. And I hope that, if again, Steve Witkoff is successful and others in the administration, there's a lot of great people in the administration working on Russia, Ukraine right now. If they're successful, we can hopefully maybe get to a better place with Russia, and they can help us with Iran.
Let me just ask you to pause it. It's everything you're saying is, by the way, in the public sphere.
All right, guys. This is a former advisor frame for the Pentagon leaks, guys, who was actually fired. He was walked off. He was totally against the Iran war, it seems, obviously, from his rhetoric. But he's spitting some facts there, man. So the wild and odd lineup between people who are kind of collectively coming together and forming this coalition between Russia, China, and Iran is, very ironic because the Iranians and the Russians never really had good relations until it came down to them opposing Western or U.S. imperialistic adventures pretty much in the Middle East and in other areas where they have a common enemy, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Because like even until like all the way back till like the 1700s, relations between Iran and Russia were horrible, right? Like they, I think it was Peter the Great attacked Iran and tried to establish Russian Empire to different military campaigns to have control of the Caucasus, and you've even had obviously Russia has really turned their back on Iran several times throughout history, because the Russians too have an issue with obviously Islamic radicalism in different parts of Russia, like Dagestan and these areas where they've dealt with that, but which is ironic now because the majority of the Russian military is from those regions. A huge majority of Muslims, a huge majority of the Russian military is Muslims from those regions, from the Caucasus. And a lot of them have unfortunately died due to this war. And then we start seeing them kind of come together as they oppose the West, especially in Syria, right, of all places, and different areas in the Middle East. So the Russia, too, wants to control the Middle East. Because you guys got to understand, like, the Middle East in general is not an area or a region that could be stabilized from within, right? From within the people living in there. There always has to be some type of foreign power or superpower to stabilize it, because the different dynamics and the tribalism and the different religions and families who have ruled certain regions for centuries, and it's never been a situation. They tried doing pan-Arabism and all that. It's never been a region where you could stabilize and control without either some type of superpower influencing it. So Russia's tagging along with Iran to be the major superpower and to kind of kick the U.S. out. And that's big bucks for the Russians, right? Because oil, a lot of things come from that region. So, again, guys, don't get it twisted. These people have never been allies, right? The Russians, even the Russians and the Chinese, they fought over land. The Iranians, who a lot of them, let's be honest here, they don't like the fact that the Chinese is oppressing the Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims in China, right? So from a theoretical level, they're totally against China, the Chinese, But now they formed a coalition in order to combat the West, right? Which wasn't done in previous wars and previous confrontations. There wasn't a coalition of outside forces who are polar opposites pretty much, kind of coming together and fending off the West. So that's what makes it really dangerous with this whole Iran war, because we don't know what type of military ties the Russians and the Iranians have, to where if it gets to a point of complete, because the Russians don't want to have, because Iran's almost bordering Russia in the Caucasus. That's they don't want to have a different regime that's pro-West in that region, right on Russia's border. They don't want to do that, right? Iran's preventing that from happening. So strategically, it makes sense to align themselves with the Iranians, right? Know what you guys think in the comment section down below, man. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.